Modest by today's standards, the Fairstar was nonetheless beloved by millions and remains the most successful Australian-based cruise ship to this day. And as this tribute will illustrate, she was one of those legends whose whole was much greater than the sum of her parts. Her story began as hull number 775 at the Govan, Scotland-based Fairfield shipyard, where she was launched by Mrs. Dorothea Head, wife of the British Defence Minister, on December 15, 1955. And why, you might ask, the wife of the Defence Minister? Well, that's because she initially was designed as a troop ship, entering service in February 1957 as Bibby Line's Oxfordshire, with accommodations for 1,000 soldiers and 500 family members who were carried in 3 classes. The handsomely proportioned ship operated between Liverpool and Hong Kong via Dakar, Cape Town, Durban, and Singapore. In many ways, the Oxfordshire was much like her British-built civilian ocean liner counterparts, with teak-lined promenades, polished wood paneling, and linoleum decking. Even her passenger accommodations were of a similar standard to those of P&O, Union Castle, and other British lines of the time. Soldiers' families were even provided with varied dining menus and activities like the Neptune ceremony held when the ship crossed the equator. Life was a bit more basic in the soldiers' accommodations, but with the Empire collapsing and the advent of the jumbo jet, the Oxfordshire's trooping days were soon numbered. In 1963, she was sold to Sitmar Line, who had her rebuilt at the Wilton Fjord shipyard in Schiedam, Holland. Her superstructure was expanded, and she was fitted with all new public rooms and accommodations as the Fairstar. A virtually new, modern, and fully air-conditioned ship emerged, with a capacity for 1,868 passengers in one class. Fairstar would operate on Sitmar's line voyage service to Australia and in part-time cruise service. On May 19, 1964, she departed Southampton for Sydney on her maiden voyage. Sitmar's new flagship was impressive for the day, with her generous open deck areas, inviting pool and lido, and a double-deck main lounge called the Zodiac Room. She had a dedicated library and a popular German-style beer hall called the Tavern. Her accommodations ranged from suites and multi-berth cabins to tiny twins. By 1973, Fairstar had transitioned from emigrant liner to full-time cruise ship. After a season of UK-based cruises, Fairstar moved to her permanent home of Sydney in 1974. Brochures from the time tout her stylish dining rooms with their original mid-century furnishings and some unique light fixtures. Fisheye lenses captured her teak-lined lido, where bathing beauties, some with a roving eye, beckoned to future guests. The ultimate party boat, the Fairstar quickly became the favorite haunt of Australian cruisers. There were big shows, some even in the ship's 367-seat cinema theater, pleasant lounges and hideaways, and even a playroom complex for the kids. And with her capacity eventually reduced from 1,868 to 1,390, those emigrant liner suites and cabins became far more inviting. With each passing year, Fairstar gained an increasingly loyal following. In 1988, Sitmar changed its livery to a blue funnel with a red and white swan. After Sitmar was purchased by P&O in 1989, the Fairstar was given a $10 million refit. She emerged with an expanded boat deck lido and restyled public rooms with a further reduced capacity of 1,280. In 1991, P&O changed the funnel to white, and then in 1993, covered up the Swan with a custom dolphin logo that carried the ship through her final years. Frequent mechanical breakdowns would plague the aging ship, but she still kept her loyal following. Knowing her time was limited, I joined the Fairstar in 1993 for a Christmas cruise to Vanuatu and New Caledonia. Although my equipment was basic and my skills were fledgling, I spent a good part of those 10 days documenting the ship from stem to stern. So let's go aboard and have a look at the dearly departed Fairstar. Fairstar had 11 passenger decks, starting at the top with sun deck. The forward-flying bridge area of sun deck was officers' territory, with stairs on either side that led to the bridge wings. During sailaways on our cruise, it was opened up to passengers for its nice views over the bow. When Fairstar was at sea, it tended to get a bit windy up there. Otherwise, sun deck was a favorite vantage for sweeping views of the ship in her element. Here you can see the streamline bit that they added to the funnel when the Oxfordshire became Fairstar. And this is the view from sun deck over the stern. Navigating bridge deck, of course, began with the bridge wings, wheelhouse, and chart room. The wheelhouse was moved and rebuilt much farther forward when the ship became Fairstar. Save for the brass telegraphs and a safety panel or two, the equipment appeared to date from the 1963 conversion. Navigating bridge deck continued aft, with narrow open promenades that stretched past the officers' accommodations. During Fairstar's latter cruising years, her gym was located on aft navigating bridge deck. Just outside of the gym, there was a sheltered games deck, followed by a net-covered volleyball court. The awnings over the stern were added to shelter the alfresco cafe on the deck below. Technically called lower bridge deck, the next level, also referred to as officer's deck, began with open terraces below the bridge wings. The interior portion of this deck began with the handsome officer's mess. Here, select guests were invited to join the captain on gala evenings for lavish captain's table dinners. Officers' accommodations continued aft to the alfresco cafe, which was added in the 1989 refit. The awnings extended to the seating on the terraces that overlooked the pool area on boat deck. The entire length of Fairstar's boat deck was dedicated to passenger use. In the deckhouse at the far forward end, offering views over the bow, the sharp end bar was originally the jungle room. Directly aft, the ship's gently curved superstructure presided over an open space adjacent to the sharp end bar that was used as a beer garden. The upper level of the main showroom, the Zodiac Lounge, followed. Only the seats surrounding the balcony offered views of the shows on the stage below. A huge central ceiling fixture with a mirrored disco ball was added in the Fairstar's 1989 refit. And much of the original 1960s furnishing was left intact, albeit with a muted pastel color scheme. The interior portion of boat deck continued with a block of suites and cabins. The exterior portion of boat deck had wonderfully wide, sheltered, teak-lined promenades. The Sunset Bar and Lounge followed directly aft of the block of suites and cabins. Originally the Surf Club, it retained its basic layout but received new fittings and furnishings when it became the Sunset Bar. With its pool-adjacent views and a pianist, this was a popular pre- and post-dinner watering hole. The aft portion of boat deck was both widened and extended all the way to the stern in the 1989 refit, providing space for a small shack with diving gear and a large open sunning area. Promenade deck began with the long, gracious forecastle, which was crew territory. The passenger spaces on this level began with the milk bar, the jukebox, and the video arcade, which were all part of the ship's teen center. In the sheltered space just aft, a pizzeria was added in the 1989 refit. Pizza and drinks were available on a for-pay, a la carte basis. Another pair of wide teak-lined promenades continued aft from here. Ideal for tropical cruising, these promenades are part of what made the Fairstar so popular down under. The lower level of the Zodiac Room began a lineup of interior spaces on Promenade deck. Although connected with the staircase, both levels had their own bars. A large lobby and shops followed the Zodiac Lounge on Promenade deck. A passage leading aft on the starboard side, called the Pacific Plaza, provided access to the shops and 2 more spaces. One of those spaces, the Monte Carlo Casino, offered up the usual round of slots, cards, and a roulette table. The final public room on Promenade Deck, the Aquarius Lounge, was the ship's nightclub. It was filled with vintage Arne Jacobsen swan chairs and, in an interesting, if somewhat voyeuristic twist, portholes that peered into the pool. Given permanent shelter by the boat deck extension overhead, the far aft portion of Promenade Deck was a games deck by day and the ship's notorious starlight disco in the wee hours, where many would party until sunrise. Saloon Deck began with crew quarters and a small block of cabins. Narrow promenades on either side led aft to the mooring deck. Although not wide enough for deck chairs, these walkways were in close proximity to the sea. The Palm Court was the Fairstar's forward restaurant. Originally called the Waldorf, its name was changed along with much of the decor in the 1989 refit. On the Palm Court's forward center bulkhead, there was a backlit canoe-like relief that was a distinguishing original Fairstar fixture. The Orchid Room was the aft restaurant. Originally the Savoy, its name and decor were changed in the 1989 refit. A disused card and conference room after the Orchard Room was originally part of the restaurant and still featured its clusters of geometric mid-century wall sconces. A deck began and ended with crew space. In between, there was a huge swath of passenger accommodations, broken up by the midships foyer and children's playrooms. The foyer was also used to display shipboard photos for sale. On the starboard side, just after the main foyer, there was a pair of playrooms. The hospital was on B deck, which was divided with passenger cabins on the starboard side and staff and crew accommodations on the port side. The alleyways in the accommodation areas were paneled in a light yellow melamine. C deck was home to more cabins, most 3 deep, with 2 interiors leading to each ocean view stateroom. Our portside C deck cabin 476 had an ensuite sink, 4 berths, 3 tallboy closets, and a grubby loo with stained tiles, a small shower, and toilet. Aside from the recently added blue and yellow Fairstar Funship soft fittings, it was pretty much 1963 all over again. A small block of cabins on forward D deck led to the upper level of Fairstar's impressive 367-seat cinema. And finally we reach E deck, which was home to the laundrette and the lower level of the cinema, which had a large stage for shows and live musical performances. And that pretty much wraps up our tour of this modest but incredibly popular ship. Watching Fairstar sail out of Sydney on that nice December afternoon in 1993, I knew the ship was nearing the end of her career. Despite her popularity, her boiler issues, lack of balconies, and looming safety of life at sea regulations didn't bode well for her future. No matter how many distractions and perks newer ships offer, few will ever match the kind of following the Fairstar enjoyed. Fairstar's final voyage sold out immediately after it was announced. Wearing a payoff pennant, she departed Sydney on a nostalgic 10-night midsummer dream cruise to New Caledonia and Vanuatu in January 1997. When she returned to Sydney, her stores were transferred over to the slightly older Fair Princess, her replacement. For a few days, both handsome former British ocean liners were berthed together. Although the Fair Princess had better accommodations and more space to offer, even she couldn't attain the Fairstar's loyal following. With her dolphin logo painted over and the delivery name RIPA, which may have been an acronym for Rest in Peace Always, she left Sydney on February 12, 1997 for Alang, India, where she would be beached and broken up. This may well indeed be the last photo ever taken of Fairstar, but this is how she will be remembered.